I've been a night manager at Hollowbrook Inn for nearly a decade, and in all that time, I never believed the stories. Every old hotel has its fair share of creepy tales, whispered among guests and passed around by the staff during slow nights. Hollowbrook was no different. Built over a century ago, the inn was full of creaky floors, dimly lit hallways, and rooms that seemed to hum with the weight of history. But room 304. That one was different. No matter how often we cleaned it, that room was always cold. I never thought much of it, honestly. Old buildings have quirks, right? Pipes creak, floors settle, windows draft. But guests, many guests, began to complain. They mentioned feeling watched, hearing whispers late at night, sometimes the unmistakable sound of crying. Whenever I asked the cleaning staff about it, they just shrugged it off. None of them liked going in there either. The one thing they all mentioned was the closet door. It never stayed shut. No matter how often they locked it, it would be open the next day. It wasn't until last winter that I began to take this story seriously. It was a bitterly cold night, the kind where frost clung to the windows and the wind howled through the cracks in the walls. We were almost fully booked, but room 304 was vacant, as it often was. Most of the time, we kept it unlisted to avoid complaints, but with the storm, we had no choice. The guest, a man in his early 40s, arrived late, shivering and clutching his suitcase like a lifeline. His face was pale, his eyes sunken with exhaustion. He didn't ask for a specific room, so when I handed him the key to 304, he hesitated. "Is that the haunted room?" he asked, half joking. I gave him a polite smile, assuring him that it was just a story. He laughed, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Hours later, around 3 a.m., he stumbled down the stairs, his face ashen, drenched in cold sweat. He didn't even grab his suitcase, he just wanted to leave. He kept mumbling something about voices, whispers coming from the walls. I offered him a refund and asked if he wanted me to call someone, but he just shook his head and left, his steps echoing in the empty lobby. I was left alone, the key to room 304 still clutched in my hand. Something felt off. That night, after the guest had gone, I decided to investigate. It was late, the hotel was quiet, and a strange tension had settled over the place. I climbed the creaky stairs toward room 304, flashlight in hand. The long hallway seemed darker than usual, the wallpaper peeling slightly at the edges, casting odd, twisted shadows. The door to room 304 stood at the end of the hall, barely illuminated by the flickering lights. As I approached, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The door seemed almost too still, as if waiting for me. When I unlocked the door, it swung open on its own, as if nudged by an unseen hand. The air inside was frigid, far colder than the rest of the hotel. My breath came out in visible puffs, and the room was utterly silent. I stepped inside, and immediately I felt it, that oppressive presence. It was as if the room itself was watching me. The closet door was open, of course. It always was. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to shift and twist, forming shapes I couldn't quite make out. I reached for the closet door handle, but before I could touch it, the door slammed shut on its own with a deafening bang. I stumbled back, my heart racing. I scanned the room, but it was still empty. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next few days passed uneventfully, but I couldn't get room 304 out of my head. Every time I passed the hallway, I felt a strange pull, like the room was beckoning me. Then, late one night, I started hearing it, the noises. It was around 2 a.m., the usual quiet of the hotel interrupted by soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the ceiling. I tried to ignore it at first, but it grew louder, more insistent, like something, or someone, was moving just above me. I made my way to room 304. The door was locked, as I had left it, but the tapping continued. It was coming from inside the room, accompanied by faint, almost imperceptible whispers. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if they were calling to me. My fingers trembled as I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty, of course. The bed was untouched, the closet door slightly ajar, as usual. But the air was thick, heavy with the weight of something unseen. I walked in, the whispers fading, but the sense of unease only growing stronger. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with room 304. After that night, I decided to dig into the hotel's history. Hollowbrook Inn had been around for over 100 years, so I figured there must be some explanation. Perhaps a tragedy or an accident that might explain the strange happenings. I spent hours poring over old newspaper clippings and town records, and that's when I found it. In 1927, a couple had stayed in the hotel for their honeymoon. The records didn't indicate anything unusual until I stumbled upon an article buried deep in the archives. It was a small column, barely noticeable, about a woman who had gone missing. Her husband reported her disappearance the morning after they'd checked into the inn. The room they had stayed in? Room 304. The article was vague, but it mentioned that the woman had last been seen entering the closet, saying she heard someone calling her name. She was never seen again. The police conducted an investigation, but no trace of her was ever found. The husband was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the incident remained a mystery. The story sent a chill down my spine. The closet. It was always the closet. I wondered if that woman had ever truly left the room. That night, as I lay in my bed, my mind couldn't stop racing. The tapping, the whispers, the way the air felt different in room 304, it all made sense now. Or at least, it began to. But then, something else happened. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it again. That unmistakable tap, 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 coming from above. Only this time, it wasn't just a sound. There was something more, something alive. I felt a cold breeze sweep across my face, as if someone had exhaled just inches away. I bolted upright, heart pounding, and reached for the flashlight I kept on my nightstand. The room was silent again, but I knew better now. I threw on some clothes and marched back up the stairs. I had to know what was going on. When I reached the door to room 304, I stood there for a long moment, just staring at the number. The air was colder up here, and the hallway seemed to stretch on forever. I could hear faint whispers again, but this time they were clearer, almost like someone was trying to speak directly to me. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door. As soon as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. The room was darker than usual, as though the shadows had grown thicker, more suffocating. My flashlight flickered as I scanned the room. There, at the far corner, was the closet, its door slightly ajar, as it always was. But something was different this time. The whispers weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices, clear, distinct voices, calling my name. I moved toward the closet, my heart racing. The voices were louder now, almost frantic, as if they were begging me to open the door. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Something inside me screamed to leave, to run, but I stood frozen, hand trembling on the doorknob. And then I felt it, a cold hand wrapping around my wrist. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my flashlight clattering to the ground. The closet door creaked open just an inch wider, but I didn't stay to see what was inside. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at the front desk, the sound of my own breathing drowning out everything else. I couldn't leave it alone. No matter how hard I tried to push it from my mind, room 304 was always there, gnawing at my thoughts. I had to know what was behind that door, what was hiding in that room. The stories about the missing woman, the countless complaints from guests, the whispers in the dark, I had to confront it. A few nights later I returned, but this time, I wasn't alone. I had asked a friend, Jack, to come with me. He was skeptical, but curious enough to agree. We both carried flashlights and stood in front of the door to room 304, the air thick with tension. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked, his voice low. I nodded, though I wasn't sure at all. Together, we stepped inside. The room was colder than ever, and the moment we entered, the door slammed shut behind us. Jack cursed under his breath, and I felt a familiar chill creep up my spine. The closet door was slightly open, just like before. The whispers started again, faint at first but growing louder. This time, Jack heard them too. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, stepping closer to the closet. I held up my hand, stopping him. Don't open it." But it was too late. The closet door swung open with a loud creak, revealing nothing but darkness. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, and for the first time, I could make out the words. "Help me." Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in frosty clouds, and Jack stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. From the darkness of the closet, something began to emerge, an outline, barely visible but undeniably human. A woman's figure, her face obscured in shadow, stepped forward, her hands reaching out. We both stood frozen, unable to move as the figure grew closer. Her face was pale, gaunt, and her eyes were hollow, filled with a sorrow I couldn't describe. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out, just a soft, breathless whisper. The figure stood there, inches away from us now, her empty eyes staring into mine. Jack backed up toward the door, fumbling for the handle, but I couldn't move. The woman's lips moved, though her voice was barely audible. "Please, don't leave me here." I wanted to respond, to ask her who she was, why she was trapped in the room. But something inside me kept me silent. I could feel the weight of her sorrow and despair, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just her. There were others, I could sense them, all trapped in that room, hidden in the shadows, forgotten. Jack finally managed to open the door, and as soon as he did, the woman vanished. Not in a dramatic, fading way, she was just gone, like she had never been there at all. The air warmed slightly, and the whispers stopped. We left the room, closing the door behind us, but the memory of that moment stayed with me. Jack swore he'd never set foot in the hotel again, and I didn't blame him. I couldn't stop thinking about the woman, about what had happened to her, and why she was trapped in room 304. After that night, I avoided room 304 as much as I could, but something was drawing me back. The strange events continued, guests still complained about cold spots, and I still heard the occasional tapping from the ceiling. But now, there was something more, something darker. It was late one night, maybe a week after Jack and I had been in the room, when I heard it again. The tapping, the whispers, the same eerie presence that had haunted me since I first stepped foot in that cursed room. But this time, it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the front desk. I walked toward the sound, flashlight in hand, my heart pounding. As I got closer, I noticed something on the floor, a piece of old, yellowed paper, like it had been torn from a journal. It was covered in dust, the edges frayed, but I could still make out the writing. It was a letter.
"I can hear them. They're calling me. The door won't open. I'm trapped. Please, if you find this, help me. I don't want to stay here. Please, help me."
The letter was signed by the woman who had gone missing in 1927. That was when I knew I had to go back. I had to help her, no matter the risk. I couldn't leave her there, trapped in that room, forgotten by time. The next night, I went back to room 304. Alone. I entered the room with the letter in hand, determined to find a way to release the woman's spirit. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. The closet door was open again, as if it had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, feeling the cold grip of fear wrapping around me, but I kept going. The moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me, and I was plunged into darkness. For a long time, there was nothing, just silence and the cold. But then I heard it. The whispers, louder than before, echoing all around me. They were coming from the walls, from the floor, from everywhere.
Help me! Help us!
I felt something brush against my arm, a hand cold and clammy, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, dragging me further into the closet. Suddenly, the floor gave way, and I was falling into nothingness. I don't know how long I fell, but when I finally hit the ground, I found myself in a place that defied explanation. The walls were lined with faces, all of them twisted in pain, their mouths open in silent screams. The woman was there, standing at the center, her eyes full of sorrow. She spoke, but her voice was no longer a whisper.
You should have never come here.
And then, everything went dark.